Realistic rebuilds have become the most popular type of save on YouTube, but still, I see so many people getting things badly wrong. Now, I'm not talking about people who take over Schalke and accidentally qualify for Europe in Season 2, I'm talking about Barcelona rebuilds who sign Rashford, I'm talking about Newcastle rebuilds who sign Elanga and then sell Isaac. I'm talking about Liverpool rebuilds where they spend 300 million and don't sell a single player. You really do see a lot of weird ideas in some of these videos. So I thought it was time to lay on a masterclass from someone who is definitely not a master. Realistic rebuilds can honestly be the most fun way to play this game mode, mainly because it fixes the majority of issues that people have with it. So let's look today at how to realistically rebuild an entire side in just a few game months. I think the best place to start when we're talking about FIFA rebuilds is to look at some real life rebuilds that have worked in real life, where we can definitely see how much improvement a specific style of rebuild can bring to a football team. So, let's start about 15 years ago in the summer of 2009, where Real Madrid completed one of the highest profile rebuilds of all time. On Monday, the 7th of July, they signed 2007 Ballon d'Or winner Kaká for 55 million. 4 days later, they had an £80 million bid accepted for Ronaldo, who was the 2008 Ballon d'Or winner. The same summer, they signed Karim Benzema, Xabi Alonso, Alvaro Negredo and Alvaro Arbeloa, who all had really good careers playing for Real Madrid. With £250 million spent that summer, which is the equivalent to about $650 million in 2025, Madrid let legends like Iron Robben, Wesley Sneijder, Klaas-Jan Huntelaar and Javier Saviola leave the club. There was a clear plan to the signings, to create a new, younger and more dynamic attack that could help them win more Champions Leagues. Their attacking rebuild finished the year after, where they signed Angel Di Maria and Mesut Ozil for another combined £50 million. Okay, so this rebuild is definitely worth looking at, because in the space of 2 seasons, Madrid went from having an attack with the average age of 28 to having 3 of the best young attackers in the world. The season after, they added another 2 of the best attackers in the world, while already adding to their solid midfield and pretty strong defensive units. I'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute after we've looked at the other 2 rebuilds, but really, sometimes it is realistic to splash the cash and simply buy the best young player in every single position. In more modern times, Borussia Mönchengladbach actually used a COVID shutdown to attempt to climb from the Bundesliga lower table fodder that they were into legitimate European place contenders. Rather than signing the very best player that they could afford in each position like Madrid did, Mönchengladbach would sign the likes of Marcus Thuram, Dennis Zakaria, Briel Embolo, Florian Neuhaus and Nico Elvedi, which gave them a core of German-speaking young talent with massive room for growth. The rebuild was actually quite big, but there was also a lot of continuity in the form of Lars Stindl, Raphael and Fabian Johnson staying at the club. But this set of players went from starting every game in 2019 to just being backups and support players in 2020. This style of rebuild is very cost effective, so it's perfect if you're managing a club that has a smaller budget. But that's mainly because young talent is a lot cheaper than proven players in their primes. Also though, it does carry a bit more risk. I would say that this is probably the second most common kind of rebuild that people do. Just make sure that the players make sense for the league you're signing them in. I think language is the easiest way to do this. German speakers going to Germany, French speakers in France, English speakers in England. Cultures can also make this kind of rebuild a bit more realistic too, such as South Americans going to Spain or Caribbean players preferring England. Again, we'll talk a bit more about this and compare it to the other 3 rebuilds we're talking about in just a few minutes. But now we should move on to probably the biggest single season rebuild that has ever happened, and it happened in Nottingham over the summer of 2022. The season before this, Forest had relied on 8 loan players to get promoted from the Championship to the Premier League, and a large amount of their squad also had expiring contracts that were probably not even going to get renewed if they had stayed in the Championship. But thanks to promotion and the money that's in the Premier League, Forest would go on to spend £200 million on over 30 players, and almost all of them had the same philosophy. They would have a low upfront cost, and they would have a lot of add-ons and sell-on fees if the players were successful. Quite a lot of the players from this rebuild were still at the club 3 years later, despite Forest signing another 30 players in the meantime, and helped Forest get European football for the first time since 1997. Off the pitch though, Murillo was signed for 11 million and now valued at 60. £3 million signing Callum Hudson-Odoi is now valued at about 40. And of course, several other players are about a similar level like Morgan Gibbs-White and the recently sold Anthony Elanga. This rebuild focused on buying underrated players from other teams who probably were backups or maybe just not quite good enough to get into the first teams, and pairing them with experienced free agents like Atletico Madrid's former centre-back Felipe, or the Swiss international Remo Freuler, PSG's Keylor Navas in goal, or PSG and Spurs' former right-back Serge Aurier, who was probably the most important part of their defence in their first season after promotion. So, we've looked at the 3 rebuilds I want to talk about, and the first thing that every single one of these teams did was evaluate their starting squad. What is the point of rebuilding if you're going to end up with a weaker side in a certain position? Real Madrid in 2008 didn't bother replacing Sergio Ramos or Pepe because they already knew they were 2 of the best centre-backs in the world. As the first step in the process, this is probably the most important one too. Unfortunately, we don't have the amount of detail that these clubs have in real life, but with the Squad Hub, you can find any holes in your squad quite easily. If we look back at that 2009 Madrid example again, they knew that Manuel Pellegrini was going to play a 4-2-3-1 the season coming up. They knew the weakest area in the squad was ball transitioning midfielders, so this made the signing of Kaká absolutely crucial. His pace and technique were elite for 4 or 5 years before this move, and he was the perfect player to fill this role. They also replaced Robben with a higher potential and younger Cristiano Ronaldo, so the long-term planning there was absolutely amazing. It's hard to say that either of these signings didn't pay off, even if Kaká was slightly worse than Ronaldo, and this should be something that you do on day one. Analyse your squad and identify where you have old or low potential players in the most important areas to your tactic. Our Forest example gives you a different view on this, where the step up in level had made every single player seem weak, low potential or old. So in this example, they just focused on trying to strengthen every single position at once. Of course, this kind of rebuild is very risky and actually led to a high turnover of players the season after. If there was more time to plan, then I think Forest could really have saved a lot more money by being more specific at the targets they wanted to sign. Okay, so now in your rebuild, you have pinpointed the most important areas to improve. It's time to create what is known as a long list. Because we're trying to keep this as realistic as possible, we'll have to take the ages, nationality and abilities of our existing squad, as well as the types of player that the club wants to sign in real life into account. Our Mönchengladbach case study is a great example of how to do this. The squad already had a few Swiss players before the rebuild, and of course Swiss players will speak German about 99% of the time. This will help them settle in faster, and also allows you to do a more aggressive type of rebuild. Basically, if your club has a lot of French-speaking African players, then players from France and North Africa would be more realistic than signing a full set of players from Scandinavia. It's just an easy thing to keep in mind to keep things a bit more realistic. Okay, so now you have a long list full of players that are realistic and you know what positions you should be signing them in. Our final step is one of the most important when it comes to keeping your club healthy, and it's all about setting the right budget for your situation. If Forest had rebuilt with Madrid's budget of 650 million, they could have ended up with an awful situation if they had been relegated. If they'd have used Mönchengladbach's budget of about 40 million, then they probably would have only been able to sign 10 players instead of 30. Before you start signing players, have a look on websites like Transfermarkt and Capology to figure out the kind of values and wages that your club is happy to offer. EA has actually made it quite easy to sign any player in any division, and with the previous steps completed, you should also be able to figure out how many players you can afford from your budget. Remember that younger players probably are going to cost more transfer budgets, but less wages than a similarly rated player. You could easily go out and sign a Mexican free agent while managing Accrington Stanley, but while the rest of their players are on £35,000 combined, you might be paying that just for that one Mexican. Instead, you could just find a player who's from maybe France or from England, one of the lower division teams, and save about £40,000 of wages, and then have a player who could improve to actually be better than that Mexican striker. So, with a good idea of where your squad is weak, knowledge about what kind of players your club signs and how much they want to spend on them, now you have a pretty solid base for rebuilding realistically. If your club goes out to sign the best players, it can be realistic for you to do the same in career mode. If you think your club is in a position like Forest, then even signing an entirely new squad can be realistic, as long as you think you really need to do it. Hopefully this video can help you to build a team that you love using, and one that you can make tons of memories in career mode from. If you've got any tips that you think I've missed, then please leave them below, because some of the best information about career mode has been in comments that I've read on random videos. But thank you for watching. Like the video if you're going to give this a go, and also check out this video on screen if you want some save ideas to rebuild. But thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Cheers and goodbye.